In this video, I will be showing you mattress stitch in ribbing. If you enjoy this video, give it a like, and please consider subscribing. Mattress stitch is a vertical seaming technique, and it works just the same in ribbing as it does in stockinette stitch. The only difference is you may have to do a little bit of advanced planning. Here I have a 1x1 ribbing in 2 swatches. For 1x1 ribbing, there's not too much advanced planning you need to do. This swatch ended with a purl, and this swatch began with a knit. Now when I seam, this purl stitch will go away, and this knit stitch will go away, and we will end up with a knit stitch against a purl stitch. Some patterns will plan for this, and some will not. So make sure you read your pattern and check to see if you need to make an adjustment. To start my seam, I will do a figure 8. I want to find the space in between the selvage stitch and the next stitch over, which will be right here. From behind, I bring my needle up above the cast on edge and I leave a tail. Now, if I was seaming normally, I would use the tail from the knitted piece, but here I'm using a contrasting piece of yarn so that you can see what I'm doing. Then on the other side, again, we find the space in between the selvage stitch and the next stitch. It will be right here. So from behind, I come up above the cast on edge, only above the cast on edge. Then to finish the figure 8, I come up out of the same spot from behind on the other side. As this closes up, it makes a figure 8 and joins those cast on edges together very nicely. Now I ended on the right hand side, so I will begin my seam on the left hand side. This will be exactly like regular mattress stitch. I will find the bar in between the selvage stitch and the next stitch over and find that first bar directly above where I did my figure 8. I work loosely so that I can see what I'm doing. Now on the right hand side, the same thing. This bar is my first bar above where I did the figure 8. I find where I last came out, and I find the bar directly above. Blocking your pieces before seaming can help immensely. Make sure you are traveling in a vertical column. You are not accidentally moving over a half a stitch. And don't skip any bars. When you get a few rows up, you can snug like so. And then I loosen that last one so I have some room. I have to pull knitting apart to find those bars. Like so. Try not to split any stitches. That's 1x1 ribbing. For 2x2 ribbing, this is where you need a little bit of advanced planning. There are a couple of ways you can do this. This is how I prefer to do this. My right-hand swatch ends with 3 purl columns. My left-hand swatch begins with 3 knit columns. This way I can seam 1 purl stitch and 1 knit stitch together and end up with a purl 2 column against a knit 2 column. This allows the seam to fall behind when it is complete, and I think looks the best. There is another way you can approach this. You could end this swatch with 2 knit columns and begin this swatch with 2 knit columns and seam a knit stitch to a knit stitch. And you will end up with what appears to be an uninterrupted line of ribbing. This works too. I find the seam then makes that knit 2 column where the seam resides to be a little bit bulky, but it works. So if you prefer that method, feel free to use that method. Since I have 3 purl columns here, again, I will be seaming with 1 selvage stitch. So to begin my figure 8, I find the space between the selvage and the next stitch, and from behind, come up above the cast on edge and pull through, leaving a little bit of a tail. Again, if I was actually seaming, I would leave a long tail on my piece and just use the tail. Then on this swatch, we find the space between the selvage and the next stitch. And from behind, above the cast on edge, and only above the cast on edge, we come between those 2 stitches. Then on the other side, we do the same. Now I started on the right side. You can do this starting on the left side instead. As we snug up, creates a figure 8, and it joins those 2 edges nicely. Now since I ended on the right hand side, I will begin my seam on the left hand side. And I will find the first bar in between the selvage and the next stitch. And the next bar on this swatch. Make sure you don't skip any bars. And don't split your stitches. After you get a few done, you can tighten. And again, don't drift a half a stitch over. Make sure you stay in the same column. Like so. Other ribbing patterns will possibly require the same kind of planning. The objective at the end of the seam is to have an uninterrupted line of your ribbing. This finished seam presents as knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 across the seam. And that's what we want. So that was mattress stitch and ribbing. I hope this was helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.